Hello and many thanks for joining us on the program People, Politics and Power. I am Imonia Marere. In the last couple of weeks, there has been an unfortunate spike in the threat to the safety of schools and students in parts of Nigeria. While political actors have been busy feuding in and out of courts within and outside the country, and while Labour has been busy with the struggle for better living wages, in the aftermath of the fuel subsidy removal, there has been a resurgence of serious security threats across the country. Of particular note are the abductions of students, National Youth Service Corps members, farmers, and construction workers in parts of northern Nigeria. On September 22, 2023, 25 female students and a protocol officer of the Federal University Gusau in Zamfara State were abducted from their hostels at the Sambon Gida community, just a few meters away from the university. Some construction workers within the institution were also taken away by the bandits. Although 13 of the students and 3 construction workers were rescued by security forces 3 days later, the 12 remaining students and 6 construction workers are still in the captivity of the bandits. Nigerians were still reeling from this shock of that incident when 12 days later, bandits struck again, this time at the Federal University in Dusima in Katsina State, and abducted 5 female students from their off-campus dormitories. Before the Zamfara students' abduction on Monday, August 22, 11 National Youth Service Corps members who were on their way to camp were also kidnapped by suspected bandits along a highway in Zamfara State. 3 of the victims reportedly escaped from their captors, while no word has been heard about the remaining 8 since then. All of these are in addition to the several unresolved abductions of students dating back to as far as 2014, when Boko Haram abducted hundreds of Chibok schoolgirls. Although the Nigerian Senate last week summoned security chiefs over the rising cases of students' abductions, nothing appears to have changed. This has prompted serious concerns for the future of education in the country, especially in the north, where the abductions have been rampant. The Chibok schoolgirls' abductions generated global attention on the safety of schools and students and resulted in the launch of the Safe Schools Initiative project. But rather than abating, the trend has continued with many abducted students either killed or unaccounted for till date. Has the Safe Schools Initiative failed, or are there bottlenecks in its effective implementation? What can and should be done to protect students and preserve education in the country? These are the critical questions we must find answers to. And I'm joined in the studio by 3 individuals who are very critical to this discussion and who are working in the related areas of Safe Schools Initiative and security around the country. First, from my immediate right is Sadhna Pandey. She is the UNICEF Education Chief. Thank you so much for joining us. Also joining us is Teso Shapera. He is the Commandant, National Safe Schools Response Coordination Center. Thank you so much also for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And last but not the least is Dr. Jonathan Onoja. Dr. Onoja is a security analyst and an incident response specialist. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, let's go on this short break, and when we come back, we'll launch into our discussions full stream.
Our dream, the Nigeria we need, is the united, indissoluble, and cohesive Nigeria which guarantees equity, fairness, justice, and prosperity for its citizens. That is our focus on people, politics, and power. It is fresh, insightful, impactful. It's a must-watch. People, politics, and power on AIT.
Thank you so much for staying with us. Let's begin from a security perspective, Dr. Onoja. What do you think is responsible for this resurgence of abductions in schools? In fact, most of the attacks we have seen in recent weeks have been in schools, particularly in tertiary institutions.
Well, we cannot hold it to just one factor affecting the resurgence of insurgents. There are multidimensional issues to it. And at the same time, I think it is also part of the responsibilities of those that are responsible to actually ensure that there's safety of schools and safety of the students. Unfortunately for us as a nation, we can't hold on to one security agency that can be said, this is your responsibility. Because over the time when you see them here or when you hear them say, oh, unfortunately we couldn't do this, they have not actually said it's our responsibilities. If you talked about the police, they would define their roles, which includes about the internal policing of the state. You've talked about the civil defense. Fortunately for us today, aside the infrastructural, protections, government protection, vandalisms, and all of that, there is no specifications of whether they are in there to be school security or safety, although they may have that as an agenda. But when you come about defining the duties that they ought to do, they are not explicitly defined. And if you look at it again, we have not actually done anything different from the last incident of the Chibok, when you mentioned in your introduction, to have warranted a change. There's no change, there's no physical security, there's no change in the protections, and there are no other things that we can see to say that, yes, there have been an improvement. So if you are asking me now what warrants this insurgents, I will equally say that, well, it seems surprising to Nigerians, but the little I can say is that we didn't see this during the last 2023 general elections. And then why is it not happening after the election? So many people have raised a kind of questions, rhetorical questions. Could it be, what eats the beans lives in the beans? But well, thank God we have senior colleagues in the studio too that would do justice to that issues. But I think it is very bad for us as a nation, because when you go to schools, from even including the Federal Capital Territory, and if you look at even the safe school initiatives that ought to be implemented, I can tell you go to schools, including the Federal Capital Territory in Abuja, you will see schools that there is no proper erection of fences, there's no perimeter fence, there are no proper security measures put in place, and a whole lot of things. So how can we say as a nation that we have done justice to our students in school and then we are protected? So a lot of questions has to be answered. Thank God we have security agencies in the studio too that should equally do justice to some of those things. Probably they are doing it and we are not aware.
Okay. Before we come to Teso, let's come to you, Sadna. The Safe School Initiative was put in place immediately after the 2014 Chibok girls' abductions. And the expectation over time is that it will make schools much safer and students more confident to go to schools. What is the status of that initiative today? Because your organization was very instrumental in putting that initiative in place.
So let's say that a lot has happened since 2014 and the abduction of the Chibok girls from an education point of view. So like the gentleman said, you need a multi-pronged response to this because the causes of it is multidimensional. So from an education point of view, a number of things have happened. The first is that several policy actions have been put in place. An interministerial committee has been set up to coordinate action across the different sectors, and we all serve on that committee in one form or the other. And another key intervention that took place in Nigeria was the endorsement of the Safe School Declaration. Nigeria did that in 2019, and in fact, it hosted the international conference on the Safe Schools Declaration 2 years ago. So this was the 4th commemoration of it. Once that was endorsed, the Federal Ministry of Education set up a national school safety policy. Following on that, it operationalized that through the development of minimum standards on safe schools. And just in 2022, the Ministry of Finance set up a financing plan for safe schools. Now, all of the things I've talked to you about are about policy, they're about coordination, and they're about financing. But the heart of the challenge rests at an implementation level. And this is something that we now need to tackle in earnest.
All right, so, Commander, implementation has been put at the center of all of this now. What is the status of the implementation process with the Safe School Initiative?
Thank you very much. Let me begin from where she mentioned the Safe School Declaration. From your background, you had mentioned Safe School Initiative, and she has just told you and all of us about the presidential endorsement, the ratification of the Safe School Declaration. All these formed the attempts that both government and non-governmental organizations have been making with all that the education have put in place, which she did mention. Now, the fact that things are happening and we're faced with situations like this does not mean we don't also recognize certain things that has been put in place by government in order to respond to such issues. The Safe School Initiative, which was brought in by Gordon Brown and operated predominantly in the Northeast, and eventually the Safe School Declaration, which Mr. President, the former President Buhari endorsed, said nothing more than the fact that Nigeria is a member country, and that means it will now go ahead to implement the standards which had been set off in that declaration. Now, just like you mentioned, the Ministry of Finance came up with the Financing Safe Schools Secretariat. And I am standing here, I'm sitting here to tell you and the world that for us, from the perspective of security, I must tell you that even before these attempts, security agencies, being it the Nigerian Armed Forces, the Nigerian Police Force, the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps, and several others have been making attempts because we have children in schools. There is a history to it. Now, it was on the basis of that, from the security perspective, we had to have a fair idea. She is from UNICEF. There was a report that was published in 2001 that caught the attention of the Commandant General, Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps, Dr. Ahmed Abubakar Audi, OFR. And he said, look, we have to go into the schools. Let's identify what the threats are. What are those issues? Very often we are talking about security of schools and all of that. What are those issues? The reason is that sometimes when people get into Nigeria or get into those communities, they fetch data and they cannot share that information with security agencies that should respond. And that was what informed the decision to conduct that vulnerability studies on schools, after which a data obtained and then recommendation as to proactive measures were proffered.
So your organization conducted its own research
yes,
and was able to gather enough data.
Scientific inquiry, so that we establish an empirical foundation to what we are looking at. When you said schools, how many schools are fenced? How many schools are located where they should be? who is actually manning the schools when you talk about security? Of course, security agencies should be doing that. And then that informed the decision of the financing safe school, because the Commander General presented this data to the world publicly at one of the major financing safe school forum organized by Dr. Alija. Now, that led to the creation of the National Safe School Response Coordination Center,
Which you head.
I head as the commander.
Right.
So far, it will interest you, as of last week, we've been able to prevent at least 48 attacks on education. However,
in
what
what
is the
parts
challenge?
of the country? Or in different parts of the country?
Majorly in the north, but it's different.
Okay.
There is one that I will tell you, I will mention, one thing that we do when you prevent is not public, because you don't go about blowing people. This has given us information and this is what we've done. But through collaboration, cooperation and coordination, the armed forces have been doing everything. The Nigerian police has been doing everything. The civil defense have been doing a lot. We work with even market women. The motorcyclists around there, they use to see that we get information. And what is key is information sharing. The attacks you are talking about, those guys, the criminal elements, they pass through the communities to perpetrate those wrongs. Can Nigerians share this information? How many of us? People have those information.
Okay, so information gathering is key here. That's what you're saying. Well, Dr. Jonathan, let's look at it this way. He has said that their organization has been able to prevent about 48 or so attacks in schools. And the few that have occurred unprevented has led to the abduction of a number of students and other Nigerians, including UCOM members who were going for youth service and all of that. Now, what does that indicate in terms of our security architecture? And of course, when I come back from that, I'll be talking to you about the threat that it poses to education. But what does that indicate?
Well, what that indicates generally to our security architecture is, one, there's no proper coordination. And then number two, we cannot as a nation say we are safe. He talked about the case of information sharing and intelligence. I will take you back a little. Sometimes last year in Kaduna State, you recall when the community said we saw some persons in large numbers, entering into a particular forest with motorcycles. That was an intelligence report that should be acted upon. There was nothing that was done to that. This after, the same people came about and then invaded the community. And those that were actually, alive, they told them, if you protect us, give us your shelters and all of that, we will protect you the more. Because unfortunately, there is absence of security. And you know that it is absence of security that brings about insecurity. Now, we come to the Federal Capital Territory, where we have the almighty War College, we have the headquarters of the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps, we have the police headquarters, we have the Yellow House, which is the DSS headquarters, we have the NIA, we have all of them assembled, including the armies and all of that. We have all of them assembled less than 32.3 kilometers to the Kuje prison. And unfortunately, again, we still have checkpoints aligning from that axis down to the Federal Capital Territory, down to the Presidential Villa. These are areas that we expect more security as we painted it to be. Unfortunately, we had people even break into a correctional facilities, release inmates, and then even had time to have prayer sections and give inmates money to go their unlawful businesses. This tells you that we cannot, as a country, be too buoyant. And when we speak on national television to say we are preventing, we've prevented, I think our preventative strategies is poor. Because if you've prevented, I will ask, for instance, what are the statistics of the numbers you've prevented versus the number that is still
That have succeeded.
that have succeeded. And so if we have maybe, for instance, 40% or 30% prevented, we shouldn't be having that much that we have people, over 27 persons, taking off from a school, from a campus, and then abducted. Just days back, we had another kidnapping. We'll say 2, but 3 days back now. So when we talk about security and what it is to our security architecture, I think with what is happening now, there's need for us to decentralize our over-centralized security architecture, because that is another way to solve the problems. Because if information sharing is to passing through the national, we have the national emergency number 112, but how many people, how many Nigerians down to the locals are aware of these numbers? But when it gets to them at the local level, they will be able to share information. So I think if it is about information sharing, Nigerians have been doing that. It is the unfortunate response that we don't have that is becoming a problem.
The Nigerian police, the Nigerian Civil Defense Corps, they are present in almost every local government in Nigeria.
Well, I think if we need to go deeply into that, then you will accept with me, where we had that farmers were paying ransoms, were even paying dues to bandits just because they want to farm. We had in Zamfara, in Borno State, where we heard that there are absence of government. And when we talk about government, we don't just about the local government. We talk about the security. So it is the absence of security in those areas that have necessitated the presence of insecurity. Because if we had police, we have the civil defense, we have army, then the question comes to mind that who now take responsibility? Then in other words, we must hold the security, Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps accountable. If we claim that they were present, then how did you? Because when you say a security man is present here, he must give account of whatever happens there. So where were they when those things happen? It shows the absence of security.
Okay, Sandra, let's get back to the Safe School Initiative. What is the level of coverage in Nigeria today?
So if you look at the Financing Safe Schools plan, it's looking at 18 high-risk states, right? But it is at a nascent phase, because that plan needs to now be fully implemented. They had plans for an X amount of Naira to be released this year, but we know that, a lower amount has been released. So the intention is to cover 18 states. UNICEF, in particular, we work in 19 states, but we also have a national outreach. So anything that we do with the Federal Ministry of Education, and we do it with the state ministries of education and SUBEBs. Right now, we are focusing heavily on school safety in 14 states. We've gone into those 14 high-risk states. We have translated this national plan that we have on school safety, the minimum standards, etc., into a costed implementation plan for those 14 states. And we are working systematically to develop state-level structures. It's not just good enough to set up things at a federal level, because this is a federal country, right? So each state needs to make a decision and to domesticate those policies. So one of the bottlenecks that we need to overcome is financing at a state level within the education fraternity. Because when we talk about school safety, often the discussion is about safety and security, which is good, but it is children in schools who are being abducted. So the federal ministry and the state ministries need to be able to respond. And so we've been helping them set up structures so that they can coordinate, they can budget, they can plan, and most importantly, to ensure that the minimum standards on school safety are actually being implemented. We just ran a survey with about 5,400 schools, looking at the implementation of the 6 pillars of the minimum standards on school safety. And only about 54% of those schools were implementing, only about 50% of those minimum standards were being implemented. So of the 21, just about 10 or 11 were being implemented. So what is being implemented at a school level? A lot of things about the school system, and that's about paper things, a code of conduct, making sure you have a committee set up, etc. Then a lot of work on violence in schools is going on. right? So that's the second pillar. But when we start to go to the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth pillar, very little is happening. And those pillars are referring to natural hazards, everyday hazards, conflict, and all of these kind of school attacks, etc., fall in the realm of conflict. And also making sure that the school infrastructure is safe, right? So when you talk about school safety, it's not just the abductions, there's other issues, there's violence, there's bullying, there's harassment, the roof is falling down, you know, in the middle of the day. So there's a whole host of issues you need to look at on school safety. But the issue now is at state level. It is about financing, it is about coordination, making sure there's good quality data, because one of the reasons we haven't been able to act in a coordinated fashion is because we don't have the data. And so we have just set up a monitoring tool, and then we've gone to these 5,400 schools to collect the data. But in order to prevent attacks, you need an early warning system. And that needs to be backed by data, and like Dr. Tershu said, by information. Because like he said, communities know when these things are going to happen. But what has happened is that social compact between the school and the community and government is starting to be eroded. And we need to work to rebuild that trust so that information can flow.
Yes. Now, you just talked about 14 high-risk states?
Yes.
Yes. What is the criteria for ranking those states as high risk?
So it will be whether they've had a number of attacks. So when you look at attacks, it's not just about whether you had attacks yesterday or the day before, etc. You need to look at a trend, right? And so we look at a trends analysis. We also look at the availability of support to prevent these attacks. So a number of criteria like that. But in particular, we look at the data collected by GCPEA, the Global Coalition on the Prevention of Education Attacks. That's the only credible data source that we have right now for attacks in Nigeria, right? And it's an external data source. So we look at that and we see where these attacks are happening. Those 14 states are Borno, Yobe, Adamawa, Bauchi, Gombe, Katsina, Kano, Jigawa, Kaduna, Lagos, Niger, Zamfara, Sokoto, and Kebbi. All in the north.
Okay. Now, you also talked about some minimum standards, the 21 pillars that you talked about. Tell us more about that, and whether or not the critical stakeholders in all of these are aware of these 21 pillars.
Yes, there's nobody that's not aware that we have minimum standards on safe schools, right? So because it has come out of the Safe Schools Declaration. So definitely at a federal level, people are aware. But we have been working to decentralize this, bring this information to a state level, to an LGA level, and to a school level. We've got like 130,000 public schools and probably an equal number of private schools and a whole host of informal schools. So there are many, many learning centers that need to be reached. Now, these minimum standards were developed for formal schools. We have now worked with the federal ministry to adapt it for an informal center. We've adapted it for an ECE center and for a TVET center. And as I said, there are 6 pillars. The first is making sure that the policy environment, the coordination structures are in place through having a strong school system. The second is on the prevention of violence. We've got a lot of violence that's taking place in schools, whether it is corporal punishment, whether it is sexual violence, so a lot of bullying, harassment, etc. And that we see that steps are being taken because we've been addressing that for quite a long time, even though a lot of work still needs to happen because corporal punishment is banned in this country for a long time, but we still see corporal punishment being used. The third pillar is on natural hazards, and this has relevance right now because of the extent of climate change. We are seeing flooding in schools, we are seeing overheating in schools, and all of these need to be addressed, but we've got a long way to go on that. We're really in the early stages, but with more and more climate events and natural hazards, we have to respond. The next is on everyday hazards. So everyday hazards are things like that you find maybe like COVID. Something has come up as a health pandemic, etc. So
diphtheria.
Exactly.
So
it is the school being able to respond. So even though it's a health crisis, it's having a direct impact on school. What is the impact on school? if it's affecting children, that pandemic is affecting children, it's spreading like wildfire in schools. What is the result? The school gets shut down. And so the child misses out on education. So that's about natural hazards. And then, as I said, the school infrastructure is about making sure it is safe, that you've got a perimeter fence, you've got a gate, you've got a watchtower, you've got whistles for the children to be able to use, you've got an evacuation point, you've got a second exit point in the school, that if there's an attack, there's a quick response and the children can leave.
Commandant Teso, let me come to you and look at from where you stopped the last time. Information sharing, intelligence gathering and sharing. Your organization has carried out scientific study, gotten data. But has that data been shared with other critical stakeholders in this enterprise? For instance, was that data shared with UNICEF, for instance? Or did you, for instance, assess the data that the GCEPA, which you talked about?
Thank you very much. Yes, the data was shared. And we got their data. That was why, remember, that was when the present leadership, the Commandant General, took over the mantle of the NSCDC. That was what he did in his first month in office. So now what happened is this. The center is meant to coordinate some of those activities. A lot of people have been doing things about safe school before the former invitation of security agencies into what they do. The UNICEF have been sharing data about insecurity around the schools with Ministry of Education. Yes. Ministry of Education is not military headquarters. It's not the Nigerian Police Force. It's not the paramilitary. It's not the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps. So the lack of collaboration that he raised is very key. And that was what led to the creation of the National Safe School Response Coordination Center. So that all of us, as a matter of fact, look, I think this is the first time I will appear on a tie like this. I'm just coming from a community because we want to build that trust. Like I said, information is very key. And whoever that is giving information should be able to trust that you are going to make use of that information. So community engagement is key. I've been saying this. What is the number of those people with the information? They are possibly far, far more than the Nigerian police, the members of the Nigerian police force, the military, and the paramilitary, which we are. So here, she made mention of 18 states for financing safe schools. That is for budget convenience. That is not for the work of the Nigerian police. That is not for the work of the military or the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps. So this center created, the center I told you earlier, is not a facility for the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps. It is a joint arrangement. The personnel, the staff of that center are members of the Nigerian Police Force, the military, the civil defense, and the Ministry of Education are right there represented at the center. So that when there is something, so what we're now doing, a security ecosystem map channel had been established so that we establish that communication link with the schools and host communities, because you cannot protect the schools without the host community. So like he said, those challenges are enormous. And I stand to be corrected. If you have been observing events globally, you will discover that in other developed countries, attacks on schools is even worse than what we face here. Why? Because some of the well-meaning Nigerians have been able to share information that security agencies could utilize. That center, remember, I said it is just been established. The 2023 is the first year of the implementation plan on safe schools. 2023. And so far, a center has been established, and I am telling you, we started with building human content. And where we need technology, we work with experts to see that we do that which we are supposed to do. But just like I said, the data I've mentioned here, so far from just February to now, 13th of February 2023, was it was on that day that the minister flagged off that center. And so far, we've been able to at least successfully prevent. These are major cases that I mentioned, 48 cases of attacks.
Okay.
So what I cannot do is to go into detail, because if we fail, it's not just security agencies, it is all of us Nigerians, because this information is with you. That police officer you see in that division in the local government cannot just act. It has to be on information.
So what you are saying in effect, Commandant Teto, is that for almost 9 years, the security forces were not fully brought into the Safe School initiative process.
For me and for us as an organization, I have just mentioned it. When the Commandant General took over in 2021, we stumbled over a data on attack on education. And this it wasn't issues of kidnapping alone. It wasn't issues of physical attacks. There was a major data that led to over 2 million or so thereabout out of school children. And they now said, look, we have to delve into this area. Schools are part of critical national assets and infrastructure. And that was what informed the decision to go into that. So now I am saying that Safe School Initiative was not a project of the federal government. It was introduced by Gordon Brown. And that was domiciled in the Ministry of Education, among others. Then you started bringing pockets of security agencies to let them know what you are doing at the level of international organizations.
So,
and not really. So what happened?
In other words, it was left at policy level for a very long time.
For a very long time.
Yes.
However, this is a clear attempt. We have received a lot of support. As a matter of fact, the present Minister of Interior, the week he took over, he visited the center on behalf of Mr. President to see how those things could be improved. So what I'm trying to say here is, security issues are so complex that you don't. This is not just what, especially when it comes to school security. Everybody is involved. The parents are involved. The students themselves, members of the traditional rulers, members of the community. We are all involved. What is important is to see how we can do. And the last forum we had with the UNICEF, you remember I mentioned it. I said, look, the resources you channel to gather information about things that are happening, also support agencies in the areas that they will also do that which they are supposed to do to prevent. Because for us, if you listen to Mr. President in the dimension he's taking, he said, for children, the future is now. So it's the collective responsibility and not to blame one or the other.
Okay. Dr. Onoja,
Yeah.
she talked about the critical nature of an early warning system. Do we have a robust early warning system in place in Nigeria today as far as safety of schools is concerned?
I think to an extent we do. We do have. The only challenge to it is the I don't care manner of approach to the issues. Like I will draw you back, the case of policies implementation since almost 9 years that was abandoned. That is how it is that you can have a case, you can have a school you go to there, and then since some dangers around now, there's no proper closed circuit televisions mounted, no barrier gates, maybe there are no measures put in place to how you take your child from the school and all of that. You can tell the school authority, there's still for you to come up with an ID card of whether a nanny who goes to the school to pick the child after school time and all of that. The school will tell you we are working on it, and it can still take you to almost 9 years still. Yeah, at the same time, you can go to a school, maybe you see the ceiling falling off, and you say this is not good. This can also be, this is hazard. It can happen at any time. The school can still tell you the facility manager is working on it. So it depends the kind of people and the approach to the matter that matters at some time. So the warnings are there. The warnings are always there. It's not in states that today you go to, you see that people living around the various areas, and then you tell them, please, you have to park off from here, and they will still tell you, okay, we are working on it. So it's not just about the early warning system. It is about our approach to the issues, our mindset, what we intend to do. How do we intend to do it? How long will it take us to do it? That is the matter. That is the case. You know, I don't want to dive into issues like she raised, but like the commandant have equally said, it talks about funding and support. And if I will, my honest opinion here is that we don't have an agency of government, security agency in this instance, that is clearly responsible for school protections as it is now. That is what it is, because if you hear what the commandant said, he said that was not the project of the NSCDC. It was something that they stumbled
It's
upon.
supposed to be a collaboration
But,
of all the security agencies in
That is to
Nigeria.
say that there is no protection of school security. There's no agency that is even shadowed with the
No.
responsibility
Maybe I clear-
as it is, based on what the commandant has said.
Maybe I clear that.
Because as it is, we cannot say that in a center, everybody, all security agencies are involved, and you cannot say, look, where we have, because I'm going to ask, like, how many schools do we have the presence of the Security and Civil Defense Corps? How many schools do we have this presence?
It depends on what is the
if-
manpower of the NSCDC.
If the manpower is not
for
enough,
instance,
then we have to create
to
another
do that.
I will appreciate with due respect so that you get me right.
Okay.
I said the center is a new creation
Okay.
to promote interagency
Collaboration, yes.
coordination, and cooperation for the purpose of schools and nothing else.
Who is in charge of
Now,
this?
He is
there's
in charge of that.
NSCDC,
He's the commandant
NSCDC
of
is
that
the
unit.
coordinating
Yes.
agency.
Good.
And this is in favor of the government of Nigeria.
Right.
It is a positive attempt in the right direction.
So now
And what is the
NSCDC in charge of
Yes,
school, of school security
yes,
and
as
safety?
part of the
great.
Christian
So
Messiah.
it's their
And
responsibility.
And that
now-
has only been established.
It has only
Just
been
been established.
established.
That's the
There
point.
have been attempts. This is a positive attempt by government in the right direction. So
Okay.
now what I'm trying to say here is that the center is not going to work in isolation. Everybody, you are
Agreed.
involved.
Agreed.
You are involved.
Agreed.
It's not all about saying once you do this, we are all together and then we should have a meeting point.
Okay.
That is the point.
All right. Okay. Let me come to you, Sanna. What impact do you think this is having on education generally in the country?
It's having a tremendous impact. So we've got two challenges in education, right? The one is that we've got a large out-of-school problem. And the second is that we've got a learning crisis in the country. So 1 out of 4 children in Nigeria are out of school.
Is this safety question part of the reasons for the large number of out of school?
Absolutely, absolutely. So when a parent has this fear that their child is going to be abducted, they don't send their child to school, in particular the girls, right? And as the girls move from primary to secondary school where the abductions are happening, they don't send their girls to school. And we know that the greatest return on investment on girls' education is when they complete 12 years of schooling, right? So secondary education is critical for girls. But we're seeing that drop off of girls because there's long traveling distances, it's unsafe to and from school, and once they get to school, there's a risk that this girl is going to be abducted. So the out of school problem is being fueled by these attacks on schools. But it is also fueling the failure to learn in the country. 3 out of 4 children cannot read a simple sentence with understanding. They can't solve a simple math problem. So education is a consequence of the school attacks, but it is also fueling this crisis. When you are not educated, you don't get the skills to be able to navigate conflict, to build friendships across dividing lines, to find employment, right? To be attached to institutions. And that fuels young people to engage in these antisocial behaviors. Because if we look at the attacks in the country, in the northeast, it has been traditionally because of insurgency. In the northwest, it's because of banditry. What is fueling banditry? It's poverty, inequality, and unemployment. And you asked the question earlier, why are we seeing the surge in these attacks. We can address it from a security point of view. But underlying this as well is a rise in poverty, inequality, and unemployment. We've gone through a number of crises recently that is giving some short-term pain to Nigerians. How do you feed your family? How do you manage a life that is prosperous and successful when you see others succeeding and you're not succeeding? So this is what happens, is that when you fail to educate, you see these consequences happening. We've got tremendous learning loss. Our human capital is being lost to power the economy and to make sure that we have informed citizens, people who can work together, that we have social cohesion in society. So the impact of these school attacks are tremendous. They're not just short term. They are affecting the physical and psychological well-being of children, but they're having huge societal impacts.
Socio-economic impact. Dr. Onoja, very quickly, is it, how do we explain the fact that the recent attacks and abductions were mainly targeted at girls?
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate because I think the girls in school are more vulnerable to some of those challenges, and we have to do something to protect the integrities of our women, because unfortunately for us as a nation, without women, we cannot progress as a nation. To me, the last I would take on that is that if there's need for us to go back and go to the drawing map and see what we need to do as regards school safety and security, then there's need for urgently bring up a situation of introducing different measures to school security, because the current measure is not actually mitigating the challenges. And if, like our commandant has said, the center has just been created, then there is need for us to speed up in our operations to meet up with these challenges. Because if we keep coming to the studio to say that the center has just been created, and since 2014 and nothing has been done, just now we are coming about center creation and hoping that maybe operation will kickstart, then there's need for us to urgently,
step in the right direction.
although it is actually we are being reactive, because if you take statistics of the children that have been adopted from school since 2014 down to this very date, then it's too enormous. The numbers are much, and it's mind-blowing when you begin to hear that over 300 students have been adopted. I may not have the accurate data, but I think that since 2014, Leah Sharibu is still, something we cannot take off from our memory, and we are not expecting so much of Leah Sharibu in our system, in our society anymore, because that is another psychological trauma to the parents, to the society, and like she rightly mentioned, is going to actually discourage children from going to school. And when we have illiteracy, of course, expect more of insecurity in the days to come.
Commander Teso, very quickly, because we're rounding up our discussion, what do you think are the low-hanging fruits that we could capitalize on to bring this to the barest minimum?
You see, the schools themselves, the school authorities have a responsibility. The host communities has a responsibility. The center is working in collaboration with the Ministry of Education. Let the schools continue, the schools and the host communities, through the channels given to them. We have www.nssrcc.gov.ng that has been released to the schools through the Ministry of Education at the level of federal, state, and local government.
I was
local government.
Yes.
As I am speaking to you, I came this morning because of this program from a local government where the schools are, not in Abuja. Not as if I have come to the television to talk about the things I don't know. We are taking step from one step or the other. You cannot just come up one day. I said it. It's not a one day.
So your unit or your coordination center is being proactive.
It's being proactive
at this point in time. That is a very important.
I need you to take home something. For the federal government to come up with a point of coordination in addition to what the Nigerian police have been doing, the military have been doing, the civil defense have been doing all along.
Yes, yes.
They now came up with a center that will now be dedicated to the issue of school safety. Just about how many months ago, I believe that this is a step in the right direction that we should rather support.
Okay. Thank you so much. We will give you all the support that you need, and we believe that UNICEF, federal government, state governments, local governments will give you all the support that you need to succeed, even the media. Sadna, one last word?
One last word is that it's fantastic that the security apparatus is coming together. We really need that, and we've had Dr. Tershu come and speak at an event, and I intend visiting his center so that we have good collaboration. But we mustn't forget that it is children's right to education that is being violated, right? We need education to be at the center of this response. Critical to this, while we make sure that the children are safe, we've got to make sure that they are learning. When you have 11,000 schools closed down in a 6-month period, no learning is taking place. So ensuring the continuity of learning through alternate means, whether it is TV, whether it is radio, community learning hubs, or digital, this needs to be prioritized whenever we're talking about safe schools.
I'm very sure that the new Minister of Education is listening to you, and you must be working very closely with the new minister. Is a very passionate person about education, and we hope that by the time we come back here, some other time, we will have some positive results and some positive news to talk about. Thank you so much. Sadna Pandey is the UNICEF Education Chief in Nigeria. Thank you so much. And Teso Shapera is the Commandant, National Safe Schools Response Coordination Center. Commander. Oh, okay. There's a difference. Oh, yes. Commander of the National Safe Schools Response Coordination Center. Yes. And thank you for making our time to come all the way from that local government to come and speak about this. Thank you so much. And Dr. Jonathan Onoja is a security analyst and an incident response specialist. Thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure always. Thank you.
All right, that's our program for today. Please join us again when we bring you a fresh edition of People, Politics, and Power. Bye for now.